It's your accident and injury guy on a day I told you I wasn't going to be here. Why? Because I had a trial and the case settled. So today we're going to talk about why cases settle. Good morning. It's your accident and injury guy, Jobeth Bowers, coming at you live from my Elkton office. Yep, that's right. I am actually here, even though last week I told you, no, 2 weeks ago, because I was on vacation last week. 2 weeks ago, I told you I wasn't going to be here because I had a case scheduled to go to trial all week this week. And up until recently, I had a case scheduled to go to trial all week this week. And that case settled at the 11th hour, which sometimes happens. And today we're going to talk about why these cases settle for any reason at any time, whether that be in settlement before we file suit, after we filed suit, or even sometimes midway through trial. And it's an interesting process, and the timing for anybody out there who pays any sort of attention to baseball, and yesterday's baseball game that happened down in Baltimore, it's a great comparison to make. And I know this isn't going to make any sense right away, but if anybody watched that game or checked out at least the score afterwards, the final score of that game was 24-2. And that's kind of crazy. If you don't understand baseball, that doesn't happen a whole lot. That is a complete beat down, shellacking, 9 innings of punishment. And there's no getting out of it. There's no mercy rule in baseball. There's no, okay, cool, you got 10 runs ahead. It's the 6th inning. We're done. We're going home. You've got to play the whole game. And you talk about, and you see this in all sorts of sports, this is what's going to happen on paper. People predict the results of these games ahead of time, but you've got to play the game any given Sunday. That's, what the football phrase is, any given Sunday. This team is a big favorite over that team. Nobody thought, well, I don't want to say nobody thought, but nobody expected the complete blowout that was the Super Bowl with the Eagles. For those of you out there who are Eagles fans, we are conveniently right here between those two markets. You got to play the game. Well, when it comes to these accident cases, you don't have to play the game. Think of it this way. Those two teams, so to speak, can come together and say, hey, this is what the outcome's likely to be. Let's agree to this outcome and go home. Why do they do it? Why do they settle cases? Why do insurance companies settle cases before we file a lawsuit or before we get to trial or in the middle of the trial? It's certainty. They offer an amount of money that they are willing to offer for that case because the risk, because that's all this is risk versus risk. Their risk, our client's risk, that a certain outcome is going to happen. The ability to see a 24-2 outcome will have an insurance company say, hey, how about we give you 10? How about we give you 15? How about we give you 20? Whatever that number is, an agreeable number. And then the other side says, yeah, that sounds good because I don't want to go through all of that. Or I'm glad that you're giving me that number because I don't want to run the risk of having a jury potentially give me less, because juries are not predictable. And juries don't always understand that at the end, when they give the verdict, that it's an insurance company paying the claim. That verdict gets paid in an auto accident case almost 100% of the time by an insurance company or a series of insurance companies, depending on the scenario. Those details are far too convoluted to get into on a podcast like this. But if juries don't understand that, sometimes they feel sorry for the at-fault driver that caused the accident and don't want to make that person pay the check because juries are often thinking that the driver that caused the accident is who actually pays the verdict, when, as we know from many, many times talking about this in the past, it's the insurance companies that pay these verdicts. It's the insurance companies that hire the attorneys to defend them, and they ultimately pay those verdicts. So the insurance company is weighing their risk. What is the risk that we're going to have to pay more money than we're even contracted to pay within the limit of our policy? Because there are ways of making that happen. And we've talked about policy limits in the past. Insurance companies want to get out ahead of that. They certainly don't want to pay more money than the policy premium ever paid them to contemplate paying. They certainly don't want to pay the whole policy, but sometimes they have to. If you have a case where the verdict is likely to look like that 24-2 outcome, then the insurance company's going to be like, let's get out of here. Now, sometimes they're going to wait. They're going to push this thing as far as they possibly can, and it's going to be the eve of trial till they settle that case. Why? Because they want to hold on to their money as long as they possibly can in many of these situations. But the economy has a lot to do with that, interest rates and otherwise, because these insurance companies take these premiums and they invest them and they grow the money. That's how they can pay these claims. Plus, they're pooling everybody's money. So why do these cases settle on the part of our clients? Well, number one, when we get to a situation where an insurance company might offer the limit of the policy, then we're kind of stuck. We don't have to take that money, but the likelihood of being able to collect more than that money becomes very, very difficult. So it's a risk of not, will I get a bigger verdict? Although that's certainly always a risk because juries are not automatic. Even the best cases don't always get the best results and don't always get the best verdicts. But what you get as the claimant, as the client, as the injured person, when you settle a case is you get certainty. If you settle that case for insert number here, doesn't matter what the number is. You come to an agreement with the insurance company. Let's say it's $2,000, $20,000, $200,000, $2 million, whatever the amount is. You come to the agreement, you sign the release of claims, and within a reasonable amount of time, the check shows up at your lawyer's office for the amount of money you agreed to. Certainty. You know that that check is going to show up because you've signed a contract. And really, for the most part, insurance companies don't breach these contracts. If they agree to a settlement, they're ready to pay the check. They're getting rid of their risk that a jury might return a much larger verdict. You're getting rid of your risk that you get the wrong jury and they don't do as good as you think they're going to do. Especially on these bigger cases, no matter what we can put forward, sometimes some jurors can't fathom putting 2 commas on that line for an award. It's a difficult concept. It's not as much money as it used to be, but it's still a lot of money in most people's thought process. So you do run that risk. So what these settlements are, no matter where they are in the process, it's risk versus risk. An insurance company, and a lot of them do this, who comes out to you 2-3 days after the accident and says, hey, did you get any medical care? Let me cut you a check for $1,000 or $750. That's them limiting their risk. Because if you sign a release and you take that check, you might be done. Now, there are some special laws in Maryland that help you kind of back out of that given certain time frames. We'll talk about that on a future episode. That's a topic that I need to talk about here. It's super important. But for the most part, when you sign that release and you take that money, donezo. An insurance company might pay you $1,000 to settle a case that they might have to pay $20,000 on. They've taken care of a lot of risk when they do something like that. And more often than not, even these relatively minor cases are worth 3 to 5 times more than what the insurance companies are offering. That's all I got for this week. Why do cases settle? It's just managing risk. Insurance companies managing risk, injured people managing risk. That's all I got for this week. If you've been injured in an accident, call my office right here in Cecil County. We're here to help. This is what we do. And we're going to take care of you, even if it means taking your case to the eve of trial until we get the settlement that you deserve. And as always, we do this podcast pretty much every Monday morning, 10 a.m., same bat time, same bat channel. It's true. You've never seen me and Batman at the same place at the same time. Makes you think. You want a topic covered here on the podcast? info@bowerslawmd.com. Just make sure that you put that you want to have the topic covered in the podcast. Otherwise, I'm going to answer your question or going to send you to somebody who can, but I may not talk about it here unless you tell me that you want me to talk about it. And if you do, none of your personal information is going to be disclosed here, obviously. So thank you all. Be safe. Be well out there. Have a great week. We will see you next week.